You're going to say BTS, aren't you?
I love BTS. They were so good.
Okay.
I went to the concert. It was amazing.
I
Nathan
saw.
Nathan saw.
I'm curious, actually, in kind of like in conjunction with KJ's question, is at what point in your discovery did you get into BTS? Well,
is that in conjunction with that?
Yeah, I don't know. It might be. It might. Well, I don't want to put words in her mouth. I don't want it to be like this was the reason I started reconnecting. Like,
oh man.
But at what point did you start liking BTS? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, just what's the best piece of language you learned as an adoptee, and also connected relatedly. When did you start loving BTS?
You're listening to the Janchi Show, hosted by 3 Korean American adoptees diving headfirst into what it means to be adopted, Korean American, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Nathan, Patrick, and KJ.
What a dweeb, the great Patrick Armstrong.
That's me.
Of the pod.
That's me. King of
number
the pod.
one of the Feisty Boys.
King of the pod, Peter number 1. Oh, just kidding. Welcome back to the Janchi Show, the last episode of the new year. Wait, of the new year? Of the old year.
Of the current year.
Yeah, the current year.
2021.
2021.
I mean, you could be listening to it in 2022, and
that's very true. Shout you out. Shouting you out.
The final intro.
You could be listening to it in 2020.
Final intro of 2021, episode 71.
That's not how time machines work.
That is not how they work. I don't think. Who knows how time travel works?
Like
we break
it's not. The Lord.
Wait, what?
In the other
Lord
multiverse.
knows.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The Lord
Doctor
of the
Strange knows.
That's me. That's me, by the way.
The Lord, you are the Lord. Hot take for all you believers out there. Patrick
it's so again, the last episode of the current year of the Janchi Show. I am Lord of the Multiverse, Patrick Armstrong, here with my fellow lords, KJ and Nathan. Fellas, how are we doing in our lordships?
I like to imagine I just have like a dukedom.
Yeah,
I can't be bothered to be a lord.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm more of a
I'd
jester.
rather just be an eternal.
I mean, that in itself is pretty. I don't even know where I'm going with that. Eternal.
All right.
What does that mean?
Everlasting.
That's true. I like Lord. Lord of the Multiverse sounds pretty
don't
right
die.
for me.
I can die, but I don't die unless I'm killed.
You can die. You get
and then
brought
I have
back
to have
again.
my memory wiped.
Sure
Otherwise, I have too much in my
leader?
brain.
The Supreme Leader?
Because you were talking about your
I refuse to
beanie
be named
says
Snoke.
Supreme.
Yeah, that's true.
Supreme Leader Patrick.
Might as well just been a clone. Spoiler alert for Rise of Skywalker. Might as well just been a clone. If you haven't seen that yet. Might as well just have
You haven't
been
seen the movie
clone.
that's at least
Supreme
3 years
Leader
old.
clone.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been out for a few years. I don't think.
Has it? I couldn't even remember. I did see an article about it, though. But it said 2 years, I think. 3 years?
Been out for a while.
Awesome. Well, anyways.
we
what
are
does
the
Janchi
Janchi
mean?
Show still.
Well, Janchi means that we feast and we celebrate. That's what we're doing right now. We're celebrating just being together again. After
at the end of the year.
At the end of the year. At the end of the universe.
Like family.
On, we remember
all the times we
Where's my
got
lighter?
together. All right. This is like
That
really
was
hard
great.
because
All
it's really hard because you were out of time with me and I was like,
how
how?
were you? We were right in sync with mine. So
I was like, I hope I'm
It's okay,
waiting
you can
long enough.
edit it.
So
Just throw
it
me
sounded
in there
great
somewhere.
for me, threw you completely off. Okay, well, I think last week we shared pretty much everything that we would want to share. So I don't know if we need to waste anyone's time with how our holidays
It's such a
went.
great interview we got coming up too.
We do have
Yeah.
such a great interview coming up. Our guest is Tia Stark, a world-renowned doula, according to
Stark
one of the
Industries.
lords of the multiverse. Of Stark Industries. That's very true. But Tia is a birth worker, and she comes on and drops a lot of knowledge on us about what that means and how not only her journey through that work, but her journey as an adoptee and as a Korean American has led her to a greater understanding of community and also compassion for birth mothers specifically and first families. I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and we talk about it a lot at the end, but we are definitely going to have Tia back at some point in 2022. Maybe. We don't know yet. We don't know what the future holds, despite being lords of the multiverse. But without
we're
further...
not fortune tellers. We're just eternal.
Ooh, that's a good point. And speaking of eternal, just in case you are listening to this, missed the episode last week, We will not have a new episode next week. We are taking a break just to get recharged and refreshed as we punch 2022 right in its 2022 face.
Just
Callback.
loop them on the
Last week.
nose.
No
That's
condoning
almost
violence.
the word
Come
for
on.
word callback to last week. But without
Or you
further
can just
ado,
hug it. You can just hug 2022 if you want.
nope, we're punching him right in its face.
Nope,
It's
looping him on the nose.
Pat it
punching
on the back.
in its face.
Yikes.
But without further
Support it.
ado,
Say, good job.
all right, we have gone off the rails, and I apologize to you, but
Quick
your
to the interview.
is so
Hurry.
good, so we're going to
Hurry.
cut quickly to the interview. Away.
Welcome back to the Janchi Show. We are here for another great interview today with world-renowned, famous doula Tia Stark. Welcome to the show, Tia.
Hello. 안녕,
I don't know,
Janchi 친구s.
Are there famous doulas? I don't know.
There are now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. I don't know.
You can be the one. So thank you again, though, for coming on the show. As we start all our shows, we typically want to ask you a little bit about your adoption story, and you can share as much or as little as you'd like, with our listeners, and then we will go from there. So go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you all. I love the show. I think it's really great. And I think what you're doing for the community is really awesome. So also thank you for that. My name is Tia. I was adopted in 1984, same year I was born. From what I can assume from my paperwork, right? Because it's kind of like a lot of it's just a grain of salt. I was born in Gwangju, which is really cool because there's just a lot of really cool, interesting history from that region, whether or not how much you all know of that. And then I was supposedly birthed in a women's center. So I was not born in a hospital, and it was a women's center for kind of unwed mothers. And then I was promptly given up to the Gwangju branch for the Korean Welfare Society or Social Welfare Society. I think it's KWS now. And I was there, and according to my mom, I was adopted when I was 3 weeks old, and then I didn't come over into America until I was 4 months old.
All the paperwork and everything.
Yeah, supposedly, which actually, like, I have all of my paperwork I got from my mom, and she, and then it has a lot of information, which I don't think is really common. Like, it has my parents' names. That hasn't been redacted at all, so that's really interesting. And kind of their the neighborhood that I was born in, or that my mother grew up in. So,
in Gwangju, isn't that just near Seoul?
No, it's south. It's kind of
okay.
It's like southwest, right?
Yeah, it's I think it's closer to like Busan.
Okay, I must be thinking of another one.
80% sure my wife went to go teach English, and like the camp that it was located was like over in Gwangju. I'm sure that she went over there to teach English. I'm 80% sure that Gwangju is where she went.
She just went on vacation, like no big deal.
Yeah, like, why are you out of the country for a month?
Yeah.
That's great. And then you were raised in Oregon?
No, so I was actually raised, kind of split between, I grew up in Southern California, and then we moved right before middle school. And so I was in Oregon for middle school and high school, and I hated it. So when I graduated, I came back down. And my adopted father still lived in California. So I really just went to college here, hung out with him. So better weather.
And so this entire time you've been in LA and now doing some of your doula work. I'm trying to think about exactly how to phrase the child. You put it as childhood education as well?
Yeah, so I kind of just use the term birth work, which is a little more all-encompassing. And it's just a little, like doula derives, I think it's Greek, and it's kind of a Greek word for slave, which is kind of like
okay,
yeah,
that seems not great.
Also, I'm not Greek, so but just really trying to have a more encompassing term. A lot of birth workers are moving towards just that term because it does encompass like childbirth education, what we think of as doula work, so birth and postpartum. It also can include death work for some people. There are death doulas out there.
And how long have you been doing this?
For a few years now. I thought I was going to go back to school for nursing, and then I realized through a bunch of happenstances and just getting into this work of just wanting to do a more holistic side to birth work, and also just not wanting to be a part of our medical system in a way that is kind of perpetuating the harm that it really can do, especially to um, people of color, people of the global majority, and just how we treat pregnant people in this country is honestly really atrocious. And I just didn't want to do more to like be a part of that system.
And so then your time in LA with how would you say your upbringing was with the diversity, and then did any of that veer you into this medical community or this direction that you've taken as an occupation?
Honestly, no. I really loved growing up in Southern California. I uh, had a pretty like cool childhood in a lot of ways. I grew up in a neighborhood that I called the UN of my community when I was a kid, because I lived in a cul-de-sac and there was only 4 houses in that cul-de-sac that had kids, and we all were in a grid. And it was my brother and I, who is also a Korean adoptee, but we are not biologically related. And next to us were 2 sisters who are white, and across the street from them was a Latin American couple with their 2 kids, and then across the street from them was a mixed race white and black family with also 2 kids, 2 boys. So we had this weird, like, perfect grid of community, which was really awesome. And yeah, I loved how diverse it was. It's interesting. I had a really long conversation with my mother recently about just asking her things about my adoption that I had asked when I was younger and didn't really get maybe straight answers for, or she didn't think I was, I don't know, maybe old enough to really kind of understand what I was asking. Um, and one of the things I had asked her, because I remember growing up with like a really big extended family, and that included people kind of, from all over, not just white folks, which both of my adopted parents are. So I had like Filipino, all these aunties and uncles that really aren't your aunts and uncles. So I had Filipino aunts and uncles. I had Japanese aunts and uncles. And, there was a big Chinese community where I lived. But I never really got to go experience the Korean community. And I asked her why that was recently. And she said it was because when we were babies and we were adopted, she and my father tried to take us to like Korean markets and Korean restaurants and things like that. And they were actually really discriminated against. And this was also during the 80s. And, adoption, especially international adoption, wasn't as like, quote unquote in vogue as it is now. Even in a place like Southern California. So that was really interesting to hear. And she told me that she didn't want my brother and I subjugated to experience that kind of prejudice against ourselves or seeing how people interacted with our parents. And so they stopped trying to take us to these places, which is really interesting to kind of learn later. Yeah, because I'm like, I don't have any memory of like being in community with Korean folks until, I was an adult. So that was really interesting to learn.
What was the process like of, I know we're kind of jumping around the timeline, but like finding your way into that Korean community beyond beyond the already present like issue of adoption and like being severed once from that community? Like, how was it? I think like, again, unbeknownst to you, maybe, you're like, I don't know, there just weren't a lot of Koreans in my life. Like finding your way back into that, like what was the impetus, I guess, for coming into like a greater sense of Korean identity? Because it sounds like you might have had like a fairly strong sense of like being adopted, but like moving into specifically like Korean part of you, what was that like?
I would say honestly, yeah, my move towards like really embracing being Korean and seeking out things about, the motherland or Korean culture really wasn't until I was in my like mid 30s. So pretty recently. I would say I've been on this kind of adoption journey for a really long time, but as far as really diving into my Koreanness. It really just started with language. So I've been trying to learn Korean for some years, and it's really hard. And I think part of that is because I'm an adult and learning languages is just that part of my brain is not as flexible anymore. And also, I'm sure that there is some trauma related to, the motherland and having this language that, maybe I heard as a baby, but I wasn't able to process. And so that was really part of it. And then just through, I don't know, life, so I haven't been seeking out like just finding Korean friends, but I have a lot of Korean friends now.
Okay.
Which is weird. I was reflecting on this the other day and I'm like, I have a lot of Korean people in my life now, which is kind of tight. It allows me an opportunity to practice my bad Korean a lot when I just yell things at them and they just kind of like laugh or roll their eyes at me. But yeah, it was really just through the language. And then it's like I also rock climb, and I've been doing that for a really long time. And there are a lot of Koreans that rock climb.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Never thought of that.
I'm gonna have to start rock climbing.
It's really great. You should do it.
I mean, I like doing it, but
there's a lot of really good indoor rock climbing gyms in Los Angeles. So I know that's
even in Colorado. There are some good ones too.
Sure, yeah. They have actually one of the schools that we're looking at for my kid has a rock climbing gym in their gymnasium for kids.
That's awesome.
So yeah, they definitely push it out here, but that has nothing to do with the Korean population.
It's probably more something to do with the mountains that you're in.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Could be those, but. That's great. So, Ed, have you ever discussed more about your adoption with your brother? Because I also have a non-biological adopted sister, and we had her on one of the episodes, but we commented that we never really discussed much about adoption with each other. Is that similar with you?
Yeah, we've never talked about it. And he's older than me by 3 years.
Okay.
And I think he was 1 when he was adopted. And that was a couple years before I came along. But yeah, we've actually never talked about it. And I have kind of speculation on why that is. But, that's also part of his story. So I'm kind of like just letting it lie as that. Because I don't know if he's ready.
Yeah.
Huh. But it's weird, right? It's like I had one of my friends, she found that out recently, and because we were talking about community and being in community with other adoptees, and she's like, what do you mean you've never had a conversation with your brother? Like, he's your first community. And I said, I know. That's why it's weird.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, I feel like, so my sister was adopted from Russia, and like we haven't ever had a conversation about it. I think sometimes it's like, oh yeah, we're the only people of color in our family, so we kind of relate on that level, but like I can just tell that she's not at all in that headspace. And so it was like especially weird for me, like finding the show and finding the broader adoptee community and be like, yo, adoption is blowing my mind. And then like I meet another adoptee and they're like, are you also this way? And they're like, no. And I'm like, ooh, okay, well, that's fine. Okay, bye. Like, because I mean, I think part of it is like, I don't want to force people into this like huge amount of brain work if they don't have to go through it. And like, it'll come to them eventually. I'll just be there when it comes to them, kind of thing. So
definitely.
But I think it's different for siblings, like adopted siblings too. I think when you approach the community and you're meeting people who you have no prior relationship with, it's easier to fall into those conversations. And like my sister and I never talked about it until she came on the show. I think we might have
publicly talked about it.
We might have talked a little bit about like what it's like to be different, I guess. And I think from a spectator standpoint, I saw some stuff that she went through, and as we were growing up, that I definitely felt like, I think I said this on the episode, didn't step into and help her because I was trying to figure myself out. And, I think that may have been rift causing potentially, but I just think that's the interesting thing that comes with having an adopted sibling as well. It's just like you are on your own journey. And I think that's the thing about being an adoptee is like the journey's so singular, even when you have another adoptee in your family. Yeah, I don't know where else I was going with that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that
I'm
makes
distracted.
sense.
It does. I mean, we're siblings first, too, in a way. I mean, when we meet our siblings, we're like, oh, you're now, when you're a baby, but you're like, okay, there's siblings. So you always have so many other things, I think, that you go through in life, growing up or fighting as you get older. That's my toy. I mean, you don't.
Oh yeah.
You're
my
not
sister
gonna,
and I were basically enemies first.
Yeah.
You're frenemies,
you're
you're
6 and
frenemies,
7. You're not going to talk about, adoption at a young age. And it's not until you're older. And at that point, like you said, everyone is their own journey. They can make their own decisions. And you might veer into similar interests as their sibling or vice versa. But unless both of you are like, hey, let's discover this adoption fog, I don't think it's probably a hot topic to talk about. So.
Well, and I wonder too, like, Tia, did your parents like try to raise you in like that like colorblind kind of mentality of like, I don't know, you're our kid and we don't need to talk about race?
Yes. And I think this is kind of one of those KJ, like how you kind of mentioned adoption is really like a mind trip. This is one of these mind trips I've been thinking about for a long time, of just how as Korean adoptees, we are unfortunately so ingrained and raised with the mindset of colonialism and of colonists and colonizers.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we are also those people, on the other hand, who are really affected and oppressed by it. So it's kind of like a weird space to grow up in, more so than maybe someone who is like a person of the global majority, raised kind of in this like capitalist colonist society like we all are, but then also having the white parents and you're, like having their values raised on you because this is what they know and what they want to imbue to you, although they don't really understand that that's like a weird paradox, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And that they can exist at the same time, but that it's really complicated. So I definitely grew up kind of in some ways with that colorblind mentality. I don't think in the sense that my parents didn't think that, prejudice existed and they didn't think that racism wasn't a thing. And to be honest, they raised me kind of teaching me that like my life was really going to be challenging because I was a woman more so than because I'm a person of color and because I'm Asian, which I thought is really interesting. And I remember my dad told me at one point, like, life is just different and harder for you because you're a girl. And I was like 12 and I'm like, well, that sucks. Why are you telling me this?
Thanks for the outlook.
Yeah, thanks. And I think
you man. No.
Right? Like I understand now as an adult, like where maybe they were coming from. My parents are a little older. They were born in the 40s. And so, I think that you're raised with the generation you're born in, but also the generation your parents were raised in, right? So for me, I was raised with 1940s values. Like that's weird.
Right.
My dad was born 2 weeks before Pearl Harbor. So like he grew up with a really interesting perspective. My mom was born in 42. So they grew up in not even post-war times, like they grew up in wartime. And so that's an interesting lens to put on it as well. I will say that I think because my parents lived overseas before they adopted kids and they lived in Asia, and even though Asia is not a monolith and there are so many different aspects of it, they probably had at least a decent understanding of Asian culture compared to a lot of people that I do know that were adopted and raised by white folks that were Asian, simply because they lived there for some years. And they lived in Singapore and they lived in Nepal for a while. And again, those are vastly different places than Korea. But I do think it at least gave them some baseline understanding of Asian culture, having lived there, even though they had also never been to Korea.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to what you had said before. You said that they had tried to take you to Korean things or places, and they felt discriminated against and felt that you were being discriminated against. And so they stepped away from that. And I think it makes sense because you're wanting to protect your child, but you're also wanting to protect yourself. But it also plays into, what you're talking about, that mindset of colonialism and those values. Like, even if you're not intentionally exhibiting those, it's all internalized. We all have parts of that operating within us and influencing our bias, both conscious and subconscious. And, I think it's really incredible how you said that you went through that experience, which as a kid can be extremely foundational, then found your way into the Korean community and found Korean friends. And now you have all of that. And I'm wondering, I think to do that, it takes a lot of deconstructing what those inherent like white supremacist values are that are ingrained in us. And so I was wondering, how did you start to deconstruct that? Because you said you've been on kind of your adoption journey for a while now. And I'm wondering, because as you go from this adverse experience as a kid and move through your life with that kind of being a foundational piece, how did you find your way to deconstructing those things? What were some of the things that kind of worked for you, or did you even know that was the process that you were going through during that point?
That's such a good question. Thanks for asking.
Nice, Patrick.
Yeah.
All right, see you guys.
Time out. Mic drop. Time out. It's funny. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, and I am sure there's a lot of, trauma response in that. Sure. I've also had a lot of concussions over my life, so that also might be part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, fun fact.
Right.
Was actually dropped on my head on a sidewalk as a kid. It was kind of
no.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, man, no one can make that joke because it's real.
Oh, gosh.
I feel you. I can empathize because I was dropped on my head as a baby on a hardwood floor.
Yeah.
Like an uncle walked me on the ceiling because he thought it'd be funny and just dropped me.
Oh no.
I'm fine though. I
Yeah,
think.
we're cool.
I think that's just why I can't hear good and why I speak so loudly. I attribute it to that.
I am not going to admit on air if I have dropped my kids or not.
Oh, okay.
That means he didn't.
Yeah, totally.
He's just like, I just want to be included.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt though.
Fun fact. But I will say honestly, like so much of what I consider to be just like my adoption journey is just also my journey as a human and as a person. And I would say I really started kind of like reflecting on who I was and who I wanted to be and who I maybe could be after my father passed like some years ago. And it really just made me kind of reflect on like how I was living at the time. And I was like really angry and like really ragey. Which I think if you knew me now is kind of funny because I'm pretty chill, and I don't know if it's because I live in LA and I'm like, that's cool, whatever, dude, like all good. But that experience just really taught me a lot about community, honestly, because my dad was also a rock climber, and so I learned to rock climb, and he died rock climbing, unfortunately. But what that showed me is that it was a really incredible community, and everybody really kind of like helped support me and my family through that. And just also, I've learned a lot through rock climbing, as cliche as that may sound, but I honestly think that in some ways it probably saved my life. Because I think as adoptees, we experience a lot of grief, and a lot of heartache and a lot of sadness. And some of us, unfortunately, don't know how to process that and how to really sit with that. And I think the things that I have learned through climbing over the years, I don't want to say resiliency because I feel like it's not always like a positive thing, but it has taught me to be self-reliant, which I think is really important, as well as be reliant on others. And be vulnerable. And there are times where I have totally experienced like near death things, and to be truly like, I might die here, and having to get myself through that. And I think in no small way that really reflected on a lot of the rest of my life, and I don't think I ever was really to the point in my life where I felt where I had any kind of like self-harm or anything like that. But there's, I feel like just as all people experience, like, highs are really kind of devastating lows. Like I've definitely felt those. And the things that I have learned through climbing were able to really allow me to process and sit through these things and then move through them, right? And allow them to kind of like pass through me and over me and not just stay And then I think through that, just understanding of what community can be and what it is really allowed me to self-reflect and understand and kind of think about where I wanted my own life to be and who I wanted to be in community with. And so that really was also a catalyst for me really just deep diving into my adoption history and story and like what more I could find or as much as I could find. And that really has just, again, through happenstance and again, through climbing has brought me just to be in community with a lot more Korean folks. And then I also initiated a birth family search last year during the pandemic, which, great, because we got a lot of time and we're all emotionally stable with the unknown. And I thought it would be a really good time to do that. Long-winded answer to your question, Patrick.
That was a great answer.
No,
That was a great answer.
I really appreciate that answer because, I think it's very true that everyone goes through different stages in their life and different struggles, and to find something that you can connect with that can help you, for everyone is, I'm sure, different outlets, different things. I think I connected with sports, and so I used to play soccer, tennis, table tennis, things like that. And I think doing the sports, and like you said, made me stronger, made me a better person, and I really appreciate that I'm trying to like make that parallel there in my own life, because it's something I never really thought about as far as my adoption trauma, as well as how to cope with it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've never thought about, but just thought about, was you as like a really intense like anime cartoon playing table tennis. It was amazing to me. Just like comic book level intensity, like huge head, massive mouth, screaming with a paddle.
And each time
doing,
I hit it, it was like anime. The
Yeah,
ball would be like on fire
Yeah,
as it was going.
Yeah.
We can
You
do
were
that.
making this very sincere point, and I was just like, anime Nathan is flying through my brain.
No, I can
I'm
see
on
that.
board. I'd watch it.
We'll find some animators to recreate that.
So I do have a follow-up question. I think it's really interesting the way that you've moved through your journey, specifically towards your adoptee identity, and like coming to terms with your adoption and finding yourself in community with other Korean people as part of that journey. I think that's something that we don't hear as often. It's more becoming into community with adoptees who might be Korean versus coming into community with other Korean people. So I'm wondering, as you found yourself in those spaces, did you have those conversations with them about adoption, or was it really more of a cultural connection that you were making as you began to get involved with more Korean people?
I would say it's kind of everything. Everyone really knows I'm adopted. That's like in my life.
Sure.
And, it's why I'm always like harping on my Korean friends to like speak to me in my really bad Konglish.
I get it.
And that is a really interesting point. It just has never mattered, which I think is also interesting. And I had this conversation with one of my Korean friends, and I was expressing to her how it's just for a lot of adoptees and even for myself, sometimes it's really challenging because people who are either from mainland Korea or people who are, other parts of the diaspora, especially if they're older and of a certain generation, don't always accept Korean adoptees as quote unquote Koreans or as Asian, even though we are. And so I think, surprisingly, that's never been a question to any of the people in my life, which is probably why they're in my life and in my community. But I think that really says something about maybe not even just the generation, because it's, people of all generations kind of that I know, but it's just the attitude of, it doesn't matter that I was raised by white folks. It doesn't matter that I have never been back to Korea yet. And it doesn't matter that I don't speak Korean really well, because some of my Korean friends don't speak Korean really well, and they're, like second generation. And so I think that has really helped me to embrace my Koreanness and to just be like, I'm Korean, I don't care. Who cares? Because it's not my problem if you don't consider me Korean enough, because I consider myself Korean enough. And I'm that person now.
So
it's like,
good.
yeah, dude, like I'm in the, I go to like my favorite Korean restaurants and I'm like ordering in Korean and the ladies or the ajummas are like, okay. And I like have learned how to say like I'm a Korean adoptee, because they'll obviously then start like having a conversation with me, and
like,
I'm just like,
the
we can get only so far. But I think that really overcoming that fear, because it is a lot of fear to try to even practice speaking this language that should be my mother tongue, right? But it's not. And there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of, I would say, like rejection anxiety, because, I've been rejected in like these ways that, are really big and also really small. And so I think for me, like that, I really appreciated the roundtable that was done on like reclamation, Patrick, that you did. And, that idea of I can be who I want to be has kind of been the like theme maybe of my journey, and that I don't need to fit into anybody's idea of myself except for myself. And so it's like, if I want to take 20 more years to learn how to fluently speak Korean, like that's cool. I'm just going to take 20 more years and I'm okay with that. And so I think just as I've gotten older, really just being okay with the struggle, because sometimes it is a struggle. Sometimes it's hard. Like this shit is hard.
Yes.
But also being okay with like the small wins and the joys and like the really awesome people such as you all that I've met along the way. And I think just like being open to all of that has really made the experience of not just being in community with other Koreans and Korean Americans, but just for myself to allow myself to be in those communities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. And I really love that answer. Yeah. And I think it speaks to when you say, I love when you say that you opened yourself up to all of it, to experiencing all of it, because I think at the end of the day, something that in all communities that I think is a little bit lacking is we're missing out on each other's humanity to try and fit them into certain boxes. And so when we get to that, when we uncover like the human side of our relationships, it becomes less about being an adoptee or being Korean or being some other ethnicity or whatever part of group or however you identify. And it really becomes more about the relationship itself and strengthening the bond. It's not that it dismisses any of those things, but it gives us, it takes our common ground and makes it brings us together in the collective, I think. As opposed, and while we still stand out as individuals, it gives us the bridges that we need to walk on in order to make it into these other communities, in order to experience not only the joy and the elation of finding other people who understand us, but also the fears and anxieties of, should I even be doing this? And and should I even be on this journey at this point in time? And I think that's the best part. Maybe not the best part, but I think that's one of the most profound things we as adoptees have to navigate, is because we do sit at more intersections generally than a lot of people do. And I think what people outside of the adoptee community miss is our humanity. And they zero in on us as either not Korean enough or Asian enough or too adopted, but like more like you're technically a white person or whoever you were raised by or something like that.
I would love to be called too adopted.
You're way too adopted.
Stop
eating at P.F. Chang's.
But yeah, so I just really appreciate just kind of your answers to these last few series of questions that I posed, because I think it really speaks to that mindset that you've had or you've been able to kind of build in yourself and through your relationship with your father and through rock climbing and having these things that have allowed you to open yourself up, maybe let go of some of that anger that you were talking about. Because I really empathize with that, because I still have a lot of anger that I'm trying to let go and release. And my grandma always tells me, there's no point in being angry. Like, it doesn't serve anybody. It definitely doesn't serve yourself. And I'm like, well, I'm still mad.
Yeah.
But I think that I just think that I just really appreciate everything that you just shared here. And I feel like a lot of that has to have led you maybe into your work as a doula, because you kind of have to meet people at the human level in order to provide them the appropriate and the right care, and to be good at what you do. You know, Nathan said that you're a world-renowned doula. And so I'm wondering, you know, how much of that played into how much of your journey and your experiences, not only as an adoptee, but just as a person, have led you into that line of work specifically?
That's a great question too. Y'all are asking real good questions today. Thank you. I would say it was honestly after I became a doula or birth worker that I really reflected on maybe like what led me to get to this point, even though I had all of these other maybe trajectories in my mind. And I think what really has stuck with me is that through birth work and through supporting and witnessing birthing people, it has really allowed me to be more compassionate towards my birth mother, who I have never met and I may never meet, because it has allowed me to see how vulnerable people are when they're pregnant and how vulnerable people are when they're giving birth and how easy it is for people to take advantage of that. And it's really heartbreaking, and it's really sad to know that probably a lot of our mothers were alone and afraid and didn't have the power to advocate for themselves or the choices to even advocate for. And, you know, that's also why I'm really passionate in the work that I do, because I feel like birthing people should make whatever choice feels good for them, but know that they have choices and know that there are not just this cookie cutter line of options for them, and that it's like whatever feels right for them, like that's tight, cool, like let's go to bat for that, and let's really try to help make that possible, you know. And I think that just seeing this has definitely, like I said, really made me able to forgive my birth mother for a lot. You know, I won't forget these things, right? Because how can I? Because it's such a part of who I am. But it has allowed me to forgive a lot of things, even though I feel like, even in the process of like the family search I did, which we can talk about, like that has kind of still not, maybe, I don't know if it's maybe any closer to contact with her, even though we did find her. And, you know, that's kind of still like a weird, like what's happening gray area that I'm pursuing. But yeah, again, to answer your question, yeah, just birth work has really, I think, been necessary for me, not just to heal and release to a lot of things, but also, again, find the real compassion for people and find maybe a deeper understanding that a lot of us wouldn't have if we haven't witnessed birth, which I think most people don't, unfortunately, not anymore, you know. And it wasn't until recently, right? Like most people were born in the home, even in America. And, you know, your people in your family and your kids and your children all witness this event, which is really powerful. And you are supported and you're in community. And I think to see people without community and see people with community and see kind of like that whole spectrum of experience, again, yeah, it just really allows for a lot of just grace with you know, birthing mothers or birthing people.
See, one of the things that I so appreciate about your story, and just, I mean, the small, like, and I cannot emphasize how small these glimpses have been into your story, because I know that there is so much more, even that you wrote to us initially, that like, I wish that we could.
I don't even remember, to be honest.
No, I wish that we had more time, and we'll have to have a part two, because like, there's just so much, but I really appreciate, so this thing, that has been sitting with me, right, in that, like, so the four of us were raised by white parents, and I think, to my knowledge, like all of us like raised in that like kind of colorblind headspace, and like Nathan, you said earlier, you were like, I don't know, none of us were like sitting down talking with our 6-year-old siblings about adoption and all those things. And yet I wonder, like, part of it too, I think for me, is the parents need to intentionally model and like initialize that conversation, right? But like be brave and sit in those spaces. And the thing that I've heard in your story over and over and over again is you have been brave and sat in spaces where like there is a lot of potential for rejection, and there is a lot of like potential for grief or life-threatening rock climbing, apparently, or you know, whatever that is, right? Like there's a lot of potential for danger, and yet like consistently, like that bravery and that willingness to sit in those gray areas, that willingness to sit in those like areas of cognitive dissonance, like even as you were wrestling with like, I don't know, I'm like, I was raised by colonizers, but like I was colonized, and also like how do we, like all of that kind of business, right? And yeah, and I think even then, thinking through your work now with childbirth education and in like just generally birth work, right, and the way that continues to shape and inform your worldview is just so wonderful. One of the things that you mentioned was being in your form. One of the things that you mentioned was being connected to the broader adoptee community is giving you language. And I wonder if you could give us like, what's the one thing that like, if you like, when you meet a new adoptee who's kind of like going on their journey or like really intentionally thinking about the journey, you're like, this is the one piece of language that I found most helpful to me in my journey. What would you like? How would you answer that?
I don't know if there was one specific like identifier or one specific like phrase maybe. And for me, just like really connecting with the broader adoptee community, which I've known some adoptees over the years, mainly Korean adoptees, and one adoptee from Central America. And we kind of talked about adoption. But I think we were also like young and stupid, and there was like too many other things to talk about. Like, who has time for this? And so, what I mean by like, it's just really given to me language. I feel like for me, I don't know if I would ever say that I was like in the fog. To be honest, I always felt a lot of these things. I just didn't know how to express it. And I didn't know how to, not just terms, right? But I just think that talking about like sitting with myself and being comfortable with myself, I don't think that I had the presence to express myself the way I do now. And I think that, to be honest, was a lot of it. And also to just understand that, you know, as a group that is not a monolith, and our experiences are so vast and varied, and yet we have these common threads. And I think that just also realizing that there are so many of us out there that even though we have these different lives and these different paths, they intersect at so many different places. And that, you know, that is, like you were saying, Patrick, like that's part of the humanity that we can bind together with. And that's kind of the threads that, you know, like kind of quilt us all together and really overlap and blur those edges of like everything is you versus me. And it's like, well, we're all kind of, you know, like overlaying on each other in these different ways. And if you just find the ways that that happens, I think we can all just be a little, you know, kinder. Like your shirt says, Nathan, be kind. Like we can all just be a little kinder to each other, a little gentler with each other, and hold each other accountable. And also, you know, just all of the things. And so I think it just allowed me to say the things that I had been keeping quiet for so long. And to be honest, that was a lot of kind of just dispelling kind of some of the, you know, the resentments or the anger, things like that, or, you know, just writing things down and now being able to say like, oh, okay, here's a place where it's not about like, oh, we're all right and they're all wrong or things like that. It's like, oh, we have this voice. And as individuals, we can create a collective voice that hopefully will break through a lot of this other noise. And by noise, I mean, you know, that narrative that runs throughout the world about adoption, right? That is not being spoken by us as adoptees. And so I think that is one of the really beautiful things about the community, and finding the community is to just really add my voice in the ways that I can to this larger swell of voices. And hopefully that will one day continue to make greater change.
That's awesome.
I freaking love that. That was amazing. You're speaking my language, Tia. You are speaking my language.
Yep. Well, we're going to take a hard left turn and add our voices to the swell of voices reviewing a certain Korean food item. So,
now you're speaking my language.
Boom. So, yep. Prepare yourselves for what could potentially be a life-threatening activity. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll be jumping in with the Korean food. Here's the break.
Welcome back to the Janchi Show food eating portion.
Thank you very
I'm going to
much.
say that because that's what we're going to do. We're going to eat some.
Well, y'all are going to eat.
Well,
We're
we're
gonna eat.
actually-
Sorry.
I
We're going to
already
eat. KJ already ate.
I'm going to watch
Spoiler
you
alert.
eat.
He couldn't.
You're not
say
getting
that.
mad at him like you get at me. When I eat
I'm
myself.
holding it in right now.
He's raging internally.
I'm so mad, but I'm not going to say anything because that's fine. I got this item today. We are eating a cracker, and I liked it because it reminded me of the crackers that we had on another episode that we all really liked. So I thought by getting this cracker, we could then compare with the Kosumi crackers.
Yeah. What's this cracker called, though?
This is the Lotte Harvest Sweet and Nutty.
Ooh,
Sweet and nutty.
Harvest.
Oh, it's a
Yeah, I was like,
harvest.
okay. I was like, what the heck is Habisita? But
now
now
that makes
that
sense.
I hear you say harvest,
Harvest.
I'm like,
I
oh.
Sweet
cheated.
and nutty.
Yeah, I was like, I'm usually really good with Konglish, but I do not know what this is supposed to mean. But
Hilariously,
harvest.
I had this sitting up here, and I just noticed it out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, "Oh, that's the name." Let me act like I could read that Hangul. I could.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
well,
Or I could
don't
not.
spoil it for us, KJ, but
He already did.
I'm looking at it. It's got more seeds in it
That's
than the
cute.
Kosumi crackers. I
I'm
don't know what the
looking at
seeds
it, he
are.
says.
What are those, black sesame?
It looks like black sesame.
Yeah.
Smells like
So, yeah, about the
Smells
size of a Ritz.
Very similar to the Kosumi.
Kosumi?
It just smells like butter.
The Kosumi
Yeah.
were square though. I'll
And
say
coconut.
Yeah,
this
and more
packaging
coconut.
was
Kosumi were
is
like,
very similar.
yeah, Kosumi were like octagonal.
These
or
are
something like
nice.
that. Like they weren't like, yeah.
No, so I love the Kosumi crackers, and I still buy them when I see them every once in a while. They are very Patrick crumbed his microphone. They were very good because I liked the sweet and salty of the Kosumi crackers and the coconut flavor. This one does not have coconut flavor.
This
me.
one.
But it smells like it.
Yeah.
All right, if I'm going to be honest, well, I'll wait.
Yeah, you just wait to get into it. But does this one have shellfish in it?
Good question.
Because don't the Kosumi? I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that's like the one thing that I remember from that episode. Besides how great those crackers were, was Nathan being so jazzed that they
Oyster.
had shellfish.
Oyster.
Oh, yeah,
oyster
oyster.
shell.
Okay.
Does it does have oyster shell in it?
It says contains oyster.
Nice.
All right, there you go.
Well,
Right
Not
after
deterred.
tree
It's
nut
not deterred from
and
it.
right after buckwheat.
and
Buckwheat.
buckwheat. Nice.
Oh, it actually says may contain. May contain egg, peanut, buckwheat, tree nut, and oyster.
Interesting.
Right.
Walnut specifically.
I have to say these are pretty good. I like them differently than I like the Kosumi crackers.
I like
Is
them
that-
differently.
That is also how I thought of it.
Okay. Like I feel like I would eat these with a different mood.
Here's what I'd say about them. I would say that I would have these with like a coffee or a tea, and I wouldn't necessarily do that with the Kosumi crackers.
Okay.
I like that they fit about 100 of these crackers on the package. That's nice.
Yeah, there's more of these than there are the Kosumi too. But
It's nice with
Lotte-
coffee.
I wonder which came first, Orion's or
yeah,
Lotte.
nice.
It smells like there's cinnamon in here, but it doesn't taste like it. But it smells like
Yeah, I don't know.
it smells like Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
Yeah.
There's a
which I haven't had in like 20 some odd years, but I can still recognize the smell.
The nose knows.
The nose always knows.
It's got a good aftertaste too.
These are nice.
I would I'm
not mad at
eat
it.
this entire package.
All right, thoughts and ratings.
Tia.
Nathan, I think you had a. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was gonna let Tia go first. Ladies
Tia,
first.
you
Oh.
first. You right. Guest first.
I don't know. I like them. I don't love them.
Ooh.
But I would
Interesting.
definitely smash this whole package right now.
Interesting.
Okay.
With the coffee.
Scale
She said it's
from
good
1
with
to
the coffee.
5.
Mm.
1 to 5 oysters.
And you can do fractions.
1 to 5 oysters. Okay. I'm gonna give this 3.5 oysters.
I like that you smelled it one more time before you were like,
They're like,
Because I
yep,
feel like
still
there's
cinnamon.
something
She's
else
like,
in
wait
here
a
that I
minute, is this gonna
can't.
bump it up?
There's something else
Convince
that I
me.
can't.
Convince my nose.
I can't determine what it is, but I
Of
smell
all
it.
the incredible things that you shared with us, that was my favorite part of this whole time. Was that you smelled-
The
You're
old
like, I think I'll
snack.
give it, because that's what I do. I smell
I mean,
all my
smell
food,
is so much
I feel
of
you.
what taste is, though, right?
True.
So hey,
All right.
And I hear you. The taste is different than the smell.
mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean,
Did you say
both are good.
3.5? Did
Both
you
are
say
good.
3.5?
Yeah, she said 3.5.
Okay.
So
3.5 oysters.
Nice. Nathan?
I'm bumping it up. I'm going to go 4.5.
Mmm.
I think it's good enough that I would eat, like you said, the whole package. I would eat it with other things. It's different from the smell to the taste, but both are still both pleasant. Yeah, I mean, I really can't think of anything that would bump that 0.5 up to perfect, but so I'm going in with a little bit under 4.5 for me.
So I really like these, and I'm going to say something that might be blasphemous. I think this is actually better than the Kosomi
Whoa,
cracker.
hot
Whoa.
take.
Might be because I haven't had any in a long time, but I
Yikes.
think these are really good. And yeah, I really enjoy it. I think I get the coffee, like eating it with coffee, and I think that I would rather have a snack like that than the Kosomi, which is just a standalone, in my opinion, or operates as a standalone. So I'm giving it a 5.
Okay.
Wow. There you go.
I
I
feel
think this
like-
has more buttery flavor to it than the Kosomi
Well,
does.
this one's also like more
Yeah.
biscuity, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like a cracker. Like the Kosomi cracker is like a straight up
crunch.
like it's like a crisp. You know what I mean? Like there's not a lot
Oh,
to
yeah,
it,
yeah,
even
yeah.
though like it has that flavor. But this one, like you said, Nathan, it's like kind of like a Ritz cracker. Like it has, you know, like traditionally what we think of like as an American cracker. Like it's got a little bit more body to it, you know, which I think is why it would pair with a drink nicely. I don't know. They exist in such a similar place in my brain hole. And I don't know, like, obviously, one of them has to edge the other out. They can't just be a tie because this is in England. We don't do ties here. So I'm going to say Kosomi wins, which I think would put this one at like a 4 3/4. Like, it's real tight. Like, it's up there. It was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And so the reason I don't have it for this recording is because Sarah pulled it out of our snack cabinet from the Janchi shelf. I was just looking for something crunchy to snack on, and I saw that silver package, and I was like, I didn't know we still had Kosomi crackers. And then it wasn't Kosomi crackers, but I still ate it. And then I was like, oh, this is basically a Kosomi cracker. But now I realized that I shouldn't have. So sorry for the subpar podcasting, but your boy had the munchies.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel you on
it is.
that.
Yeah, and you dragged Sarah into that too.
I did.
Gosh, the voice of the show, KJ. Come on.
I feel like this would be really good as like a pie crumble topping.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, like
Pie
on like a-
crust.
Ooh.
Yeah, like on a
I like
berry
that.
pie or something, like a rhubarb pie.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, Tia,
Oh yeah, Isaac.
yeah, Tia, amazing interview today. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciated taking the time out and amazing answers. Everything you said, I think we all were
You gave
like,
such great answers.
Yeah, I did. I thought they were all
such
great. I did.
Questions.
A+.
so. Well, Patrick, he asked all the good questions. I don't know. I just throw them
think
tangents.
we all
and
ask
the
good
side
questions.
balls. So,
The side
We
but
all ask questions. Side balls.
I don't know what that is, but I'm saying it more.
See, I don't even know what I'm saying. But no, we appreciate it. Where can people find you if you would like them to get in contact with you or follow you on Instagram? Feel free to share any of your, or maybe they want to hire a world famous doula.
I really am only on Instagram. I have a Facebook that's really just so my mom can see that I'm like alive and doing stuff.
That tracks.
Not because I actually like use it. So I'm on Instagram 2 ways. If you just want to see me like snacking and rock climbing, you can go to Stark Incorporated. Marvel didn't take that one from me yet.
Curious. Yeah.
You could make a pretty penny when they do come.
Right? I don't know. It's been a while. I've had that since the beginning. So
nice.
Still around. And then if you want to just follow my birthwork / adoption stuff page, it's Samshin Birth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. And that'll be linked in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tia.
Yeah, thank you all. If you're ever in LA, let me know and I'll take you to my favorite Korean restaurant run by a bunch of Dada Ajima.
All right.
Well, we definitely will. And yeah, again, thank you so much for the wonderful interview. If y'all want to hear more interviews just like this one, make sure you go to janchishow.com. You can find all of our episodes listed there. You can also go wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do that at Janchi Show. We're also accepting email currently because we're super cool. You can send that to janchishow@justlikemedia.com. If you're so inclined, because you do really enjoy our show, please, you don't have to do this, but please do it. Go to Apple Podcasts. Go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. Even if you hate the show, please make it a 5-star rating. You can say whatever you want in the comments. And if you do also feel inclined and would like to support the show, you can go to janchishow.com/support. There are a lot of cool merch options, a lot of different ways that you can help support us and keep the lights on, keep the mics on, because without the mics, we can't do any of this. So
it's true.
If you want to find me, you can reach me at Patrick in the World on Instagram, or you can go to my website, patrickintheworld.me. KJ?
Nice. You can find me at KJ Relke wherever I want to be found on the internet, and Nathan can be found
at N Nowak on Instagram and Nathan Nowak on Facebook.
We did it, everyone. Seamless transitions.
That was so seamless, and this may be the best outro that we've ever done. So I'm not going to ruin it and say we will be back next Wednesday with another brand new episode. Until then, Janchi
Heyo. Great.
Perfect.
Stop the recording.